you. How do you tackle the gangs? And I don't want a sermon on gangs, I want a strategy.
Rebecca, can we please be real about it isn't just gangs who are committing crime? We really need to pull that back. Now, secondly, I want to say to victims of any crime and any harm, you did not deserve that. You did not have to face that violence. This didn't need to happen, and you deserve all the support to heal and overcome that violence. What I know and what I have seen in the community that works is when people have something to lose, when people have something to belong to, that is how we stop crime, and I have seen that work happening in communities.
What does that tangibly mean, Marama?
It means, for example, the iwi in Kahungunu who I have been working with, who have been doing whatever it takes to form relationships so that they can be connected to families, and families know they can pick up the phone and say, please help me before I go to my normal behaviour because the shit is hitting the fan. That is preventing violence and crime. That is what works.
Winston, what do you think about that?
Look, the biggest victim of crime in this country is Maori and Pacifica. And the reality of it is, we've got all these excuses like it's colonialism, or it's the system, or it's everything else. But when you've been brought up in poor Maori settlements and where people do not commit crime, where they have the descendants of the Maori battalion, all those law-abiding people, we know we can fix this here, but we can't fix it with duplicity. Now,
how do you fix it?
Start with the gangs. You outlaw them just like Queensland and Western Australia. But you give them a 40-hour job a week and tell them the straight and narrow. But we're not going to be letting them bludge off their own people and the rest of the country.
I want to know more about that, Winston, that you're going to outlaw them, you're going to brand them as terrorists, but what next?
What next?
What does outlawing mean?
What next? Well, there's 2,000 spare beds in the prisons. If you don't like it, we're going to have a prison-only place for gangs, a gang-only place for prisoners who are gangsters, because we don't want them infiltrating the rest of the prison population like they have been doing in the past.
But are you saying that you're just going to lock up gang members? Because there's 9,000 of those.
No. If your intention is to carry on the path of countless crimes, mainly against your own people and against society, then we are going to, yes, lock you up, and we will not be having the judiciary deciding that it's the lack of breastfeeding is the problem. We're going to deal with it properly.
Well, that's a lot of prisoners. Marama.
Putting out messages about having prisons only for crimes really undervalues and minimises all the victims of all other crimes that happen every single day in this country, and that is dangerous.
I want to come to David now, Marama, because you were talking about slashing spending earlier, you were talking about fiscal restraint, but you want to spend $1 billion adding 500 prison beds a year, and each of those prisoners costs $200,000 a year to house. So it is an expensive policy, particularly right now, and I think you agree that prison right now doesn't work.
Well, I agree with everything you said up to the point where you said it didn't work. And yes, it's true that we're trying to reduce government expenditure, but we're the only party that produces a fully costed alternative budget that lays out how we'd pay for it. And if you want to talk about the expense of prison, let me put it this way. For a person sitting in this room, the cost per day of having 10,000 of the worst offenders in prison is $1 per day. So actually, in terms of what it costs New Zealanders to be safe from the worst criminals, I don't think it's that expensive. On the other hand, if we allow people to go out on the loose, put them on home detention, even for doing domestic violence, well, we know what happens because Labor has carried out that experiment over the past 5 years. We know what happens if you reduce the prison population by 40%. Criminals out means more crime. And I actually agree with Marama about what she said. The welfare state has failed so many people. They've got nothing to lose and nothing to belong to. And we do need to do better.
That's not what I said.
We need to do better. We do need to do better. Well, you've got a welfare state. Do you disagree that the welfare state spends a third of New Zealand's economy, or do you disagree that it's failed leaving people
I disagree that anyone has to be poor or homeless in this country when wealth is held in the hands of the few. We've got the resources, the Greens, and excuse me, you're not the only party to have put out a manifesto fully costed. We were the first to go out with fully costed priorities.
I read part of it. Do you want to talk about about.
Actually, Rebecca, they both put out a manifesto before the preview and one out today. They've got two, the ACT Party has. And their one,
because
the preview didn't matter.
Anyway,
they put it out regardless.
Solutions to Party Māori has solutions.
Yes.
We don't believe that this approach of being tough on crime and soft on poverty is the best way forward. And what we've talked about in a whole suite of policies, which also has a manifesto that you can look up online. I didn't bring my hard copy with me, but the reality is that we have to stop remembering that poverty is the problem of why we have the complex issues. We've got 80% of those women that are inside who are Māori are in because of crimes of poverty. Yep. We've got issues where we've got those in gangs are being recruited. The people who aren't in gangs are being recruited as they go into the prison system. So we have to flip it upside down, change it. And I think that's the problem, is that we're debating status quo. Status quo doesn't work. We can't prison our way out of justice. We've got to sit there and invest in solutions, have less prisons built, more interventions, more mental health, more investment in
Winston.
Stop.
Rebecca, prisons are meant to be about punishment and rehabilitation. And now there are a whole lot of people in prison who should not be there.
That's right.
They're white-collar criminals. They should be out there working 6 days a week.
Let me finish off.
There are 2,000 spare prison beds now. And the moment you make sure that prisoners realise, or criminals realise, that crime does not pay, our crime and our penal numbers will go down, not up.
Winston, I want to ask you about that, and I want to say, Debbie, just one moment.
Old-fashioned view.
I want to ask you about that because you say that white-collar criminals should be let out of prison. But doesn't that undermine the devastation that actually that white-collar criminals can have on people and their families? There will be people watching this tonight who have lost everything and have been financially ruined by white collars.
That's the biggest gang.
So what do you say to them?
You asked a question. And you deserve an answer. You were reciting the cost of having people in prison. You're wrong about this cost. You got it far too high. But however, why are we paying this massive cost for prisoners when they could be out there working 6 days a week and getting? I'm
bringing you back to the question, which is to those people who have suffered devastating losses and trauma from white-collar criminals and also from being scammed, those sorts of crimes. Why shouldn't they see those perpetrators go to prison?
Because instead of first of all, they've robbed by financial means somebody in the public, and then they're going to rob them the second time by robbing them being a cost of being in prison. I want them out there 6 days a week, bracelet around their ankles, slaving it off for the next 3 or 4 years to pay back their done debt on society.
Madam, you've got one final comment.
What I want to do is focus on stopping people from committing crime and going to prison in the first place.
I think we all want that.
That's housing, poverty,
and if we're going to not address poverty,
but once you have committed a crime, people should be going to prison. That's why we would fund more prison spaces. We'd change the Sentencing Act. Fundamentally, we would bring the pendulum back towards consequences for criminals and rights for victims. And it doesn't matter if it's white-collar crime, blue-collar crime or any colour crime, there should be consequences for crime. Moving away from that in the last 5 years has led to so many victims and tragic circumstances for too many people.
Okay.